November 2nd, 1941, Hatfield Aerodrome, Hertfordshire. The sound made Oberleutnant Klaus Hoffmann freeze in his tracks. Through the cold autumn air came a noise unlike anything he'd heard in 2 years of combat flying. Not the throaty roar of merlins, not the distinctive bark of radial engines, but something else entirely. A smooth, almost musical hum that seemed to slice through the air itself. Hoffmann was a prisoner of war, captured 3 weeks earlier after his Messerschmitt 109 was shot down over Kent. The British were taking him and 24 other Luftwaffe pilots to a permanent camp when the transport stopped unexpectedly at an operational airfield. Through the wire fence, Hoffmann watched as the strangest aircraft he'd ever seen taxied past. It looked like someone had glued plywood together in the rough shape of a fighter and hoped for the best. The fuselage appeared to be made of bare wood. The twin engines sat in nacelles that seemed too fragile to contain a lawnmower, let alone Rolls-Royce Merlins. The whole thing looked like a project built in someone's garden shed. Hoffmann turned to his fellow prisoner, Hauptmann Ernst Weber, and laughed. "Have you ever seen anything so ridiculous? The British are so desperate they're building aircraft from furniture wood." Weber grinned back. "I give it 10 hours before it shakes itself apart. Look at it. There's not a single rivet on the fuselage. It's literally held together with glue." What neither German pilot knew as they mocked that peculiar aircraft was that they were witnessing the maiden flight of the most remarkable combat aircraft of the Second World War. Within 18 months, this wooden joke would become the Luftwaffe's most feared nemesis. Within 2 years, German pilots would refuse missions if they knew Mosquitos were operating in the area. The laughter would die in their throats, replaced by the sound of Merlin engines approaching at speeds no German fighter could match. The de Havilland Mosquito wasn't just an aircraft. It was proof that British ingenuity could transform desperate shortage into devastating advantage. Built from wood because aluminium was scarce, constructed in furniture factories because aircraft plants were overwhelmed, designed to be unarmed because the Air Ministry wouldn't spare machine guns. Every limitation became a strength. Every constraint sparked innovation. The result was an aircraft so fast, so versatile, and so deadly that German crews developed a saying that spread through every Luftwaffe base from Norway to Italy. "If you see a Mosquito, pray it hasn't seen you. If it has seen you, pray your parachute works. If you have no parachute, make peace with God." The story of how a wooden bomber defeated the greatest air force in Europe begins not with engineers or test pilots, but with bureaucratic obstinacy and the stubborn vision of one man who refused to accept that conventional wisdom was actually wise. Geoffrey de Havilland had been building aircraft since 1909. By 1940, he was 60 years old and had seen every trend and fashion in aviation design. When the Air Ministry issued specifications for a new fast bomber in late 1939, de Havilland read the requirements and immediately saw the fundamental flaw. The ministry wanted an aircraft that could carry a 3,000-pound bomb load, defend itself with multiple gun turrets, carry a crew of at least 3, and fly at 250 miles per hour. De Havilland knew this was impossible, or rather, he knew it was possible but pointless. The weight of the guns, turrets, gunners, and ammunition would make the aircraft slow. And a slow bomber, no matter how many guns it carried, was a dead bomber. He proposed something radical. Build a bomber so fast that it didn't need guns. Make it from wood to save weight and conserve precious metal. Crew it with just 2 men. Strip out everything that wasn't absolutely essential. Pour all the saved weight into speed. The Air Ministry's response was immediate and dismissive. They rejected the proposal without even a formal review. The concept violated every established doctrine of bomber design. Bombers needed defensive armament. Everyone knew this. The losses suffered by unescorted daylight bombers in the early war proved it. A wooden aircraft was ridiculous. A bomber without guns was suicidal. The whole idea was the fantasy of an old man who'd lost touch with modern warfare. But de Havilland had powerful allies. Air Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman understood what the designer was proposing. He pushed the concept up through channels. Eventually, in December 1939, the ministry grudgingly authorized construction of a single prototype. They made it clear they expected nothing from it. The official specification stated that if the aircraft proved successful, it might be useful as a reconnaissance platform. Maybe. The words dripped with skepticism. De Havilland set to work with his team at Salisbury Hall, a secluded manor house in Hertfordshire. They designed an aircraft that broke every rule. The fuselage would be constructed from 3-ply balsa wood sandwiched between sheets of birch plywood, bonded together with aerolite resin glue. This created a monocoque structure stronger than aluminium of equivalent weight. The wings used the same sandwich construction, shaped over wooden formers and stringers. Not a single metal fastener held the primary structure together. It was all wood and glue. The engines were Rolls-Royce Merlin 20s, the same engines that powered Spitfires and Hurricanes, but in the Mosquito, they would be pushed harder and run faster than in any single-engine fighter. The aerodynamics were obsessively refined. Every surface was smoothed to perfection. The landing gear retracted cleanly. Even the exhausts were carefully shaped to produce thrust. Every detail was optimized for one thing: speed. The prototype, serial number W4050, rolled out in November 1940. It looked exactly like what Hoffman would see a year later, a wooden aircraft that appeared almost handmade, elegant in some ways but strangely fragile in others. Test pilot Jeffrey de Havilland Jr., the designer's son, took it up for the first time on November 25th. He landed 20 minutes later with a smile splitting his face. The aircraft was astonishing. Light on the controls, stable, and fast. Faster than anyone had dared hope. Initial tests showed it could reach 380 miles per hour in level flight. That was faster than any bomber in the world. Faster than most fighters. The Air Ministry's skeptical observers suddenly paid attention. But it was the next series of tests that transformed skepticism into excitement. In December, the prototype raced against a Spitfire Mark II. The Mosquito won easily. They tried again with the latest Spitfire Mark V. The Mosquito matched it in level flight and outclimbed it. The wooden bomber was performing like a frontline fighter, and it could carry a 2,000-pound bomb load while doing it. The production order came through in March 1941. Build 50 Mosquitoes. The Air Ministry still wasn't entirely convinced, but they couldn't ignore the test results. De Havilland immediately faced a problem that would transform the aircraft's future. There was no aluminium to spare. Aircraft factories were running at maximum capacity, but wood was plentiful. And Britain had hundreds of furniture manufacturers sitting idle because nobody was buying dining tables during the Blitz. De Havilland dispersed Mosquito production across the country. The fuselage halves were built in furniture factories. The wings came from piano manufacturers. Companies that had made billiard tables and wardrobes now crafted wooden aircraft components with the same precision they'd once applied to dovetail joints. Women who'd never seen an aircraft before learned to shape balsa and birch to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Craftsmen who'd built church organs installed fuel systems and wiring looms. The German intelligence service, the Abwehr, received reports about wooden aircraft being built in furniture factories. They filed the reports under British propaganda and ignored them. The idea was too absurd to take seriously. Wood was what you used to build gliders, not combat aircraft. The British were clearly spreading disinformation to mask their real aircraft developments. By September 1942, the first operational Mosquito squadron was ready. Number 105 Squadron, based at Horsham St. Faith, received 16 aircraft designated Mosquito B Mark IV. These were pure bombers with a bay capable of carrying 4 500-pound bombs. The crews were skeptical. Some had flown Blenheims and Wellingtons, multi-engine bombers with turrets and gunners. Now they were being asked to fly into occupied Europe in an unarmed wooden aircraft with only speed for protection. Squadron leader George Perry led the first operational mission on September 15, 1942. The target was Oslo, specifically the Gestapo headquarters in Victoria Terrace. 4 Mosquitoes would fly in broad daylight, unescorted, across 600 miles of German-controlled territory. They would rely entirely on speed and surprise. The aircraft took off in pairs. Perry's navigator, Flight Lieutenant Peter Bristow, noted in his log that they climbed to 8,000 feet and set course across the North Sea at 320 miles per hour. Below, German radar stations tracked them but didn't react. The plots showed aircraft moving too fast to be bombers. They must be fighters on patrol. No bomber could possibly fly that fast. Over Norway, things changed. Luftwaffe controllers realized these weren't fighters. They scrambled Messerschmitt 109s from Stavanger, but the German fighters couldn't catch up. The Mosquitos were flying at the 109's maximum speed while cruising comfortably. When the German pilots pushed to combat power, their engines overheated within minutes. The Mosquitos pulled away effortlessly. Perry reached Oslo at precisely 11:30. The Mosquitos descended to rooftop height, threading between buildings at 350 miles per hour. German anti-aircraft crews barely had time to track them, let alone fire. The 4 aircraft released their bombs with precision, pulled up sharply, and were gone. The entire attack lasted 45 seconds. The return flight was equally remarkable. German fighters pursued but couldn't close the distance. Flak batteries fired at empty sky as the Mosquitos flashed past. All 4 aircraft returned safely to Horsham St. Faith. They'd flown 1,200 miles, attacked a target in the heart of occupied territory, and suffered not a single bullet hole. The crews emerged from their aircraft in shock. They'd expected a desperate fight for survival. Instead, they'd taken a pleasant high-speed excursion to Norway. It felt more like we were racing someone rather than fighting them, Bristow told the debriefing officer. The Germans couldn't touch us. We were simply too fast. The Air Ministry finally understood what they had. The Mosquito wasn't just fast for a bomber, it was fast, period. Faster than the frontline German fighters, fast enough to make defensive armament unnecessary. De Havilland had been right. Speed was the ultimate defense. But while Bomber Command was discovering the Mosquito's potential, Fighter Command was about to transform it into something even more devastating. Wing Commander Basil Embry saw the bomber variant and immediately recognized its fighter potential. The aircraft had the speed, the range, and the handling. It just needed guns. The fighter variant, designated Mosquito F Mark II, emerged in early 1943. The bomb bay was replaced with 4 20mm Hispano cannons. 4 303 Browning machine guns were mounted in the nose. The result was firepower that exceeded any single-engine fighter, delivered from a platform that could outrun anything in the sky. Hauptmann Wilhelm Herget encountered the fighter variant on January 23, 1943. He was leading a flight of 4 Messerschmitt 110 night fighters on patrol over Holland when ground control warned him of an unidentified contact approaching at high speed. Herget, an experienced night fighter pilot with 17 confirmed kills, positioned his formation to intercept. The contact appeared on his radar operator's scope. Speed estimated at 380 miles per hour. Herget assumed it was a lost Junkers 88 returning from England. He closed to visual range and nearly crashed from shock. The aircraft ahead was a British bomber of some kind, twin-engine, mid-wing design but moving at fighter speed. And it was alone. No formation, no escort, no defensive fire. Herget called his wingman forward for a joint attack. Before he could position, the British aircraft simply accelerated away. Herget pushed his 110 to maximum power. The Mosquito pulled further ahead. Within 60 seconds, it had disappeared into the darkness. Ground control asked for his report. Herget, stunned, described what he'd seen. The controller laughed and told him he'd been chasing a Mosquito. "They're everywhere now," the controller explained. "You can't catch them. Nobody can. Just avoid them and hope they don't see you first." This was new intelligence. German pilots had heard rumors about fast British bombers, but this was their first confirmation that these aircraft were also being used as fighters. And if they were this fast, they were essentially invulnerable to conventional interception. The Luftwaffe's response was predictable. They assumed the Mosquito had some secret engine modification or used special fuel. Captured aircraft were studied obsessively. German engineers were stunned to find standard Merlin engines. Nothing modified, nothing special. The speed came entirely from aerodynamic efficiency and low weight. The wooden construction that German intelligence had dismissed as propaganda was real and devastatingly effective. By mid-1943, Mosquitos were flying missions that would have been suicide for any other aircraft. Number 639 Squadron began intruder operations over Germany, hunting Luftwaffe night fighters as they tried to land after missions against RAF bombers. The Mosquitos would arrive over German airfields just as the fighters were returning, Fuel low, ammunition expended, pilots exhausted. The wooden hunters would drop from the darkness, cannons blazing, destroying fighters that never had a chance to defend themselves. Oberleutnant Martin Becker, a Luftwaffe night fighter ace, described an encounter in his diary. We had just landed at Vechta after a 4-hour patrol. My radar operator and I were climbing from the aircraft when we heard engines. Not ours. Different sound. Smoother. Someone shouted, "Mosquito!" And we ran. The aircraft swept across the field at perhaps 50 meters altitude. Cannon fire walked across the parked fighters. 7 aircraft destroyed in maybe 10 seconds. We couldn't even see it properly, just a dark shape moving impossibly fast. Then it was gone. The psychological impact was devastating. Luftwaffe pilots who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became nervous wrecks when Mosquitoes were reported in their area. The wooden aircraft seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with overwhelming firepower, and vanish before anyone could react. German crews started calling them Holzschlagen, wooden lightning. But the Mosquito's most famous role was yet to come. In January 1944, the RAF faced a crisis. German V-weapon sites were multiplying across France. Intelligence estimated hundreds of launch facilities were under construction for the V-1 flying bomb and V-2 rocket. These had to be destroyed before they became operational, but the sites were small, hardened, and defended by massive flak concentrations. Conventional bombing raids would suffer catastrophic losses for minimal results. The answer was the Mosquito, specifically a new variant called the FB Mark VI, a fighter bomber that combined the fighter's guns with the bomber's ability to carry ordnance. These aircraft could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs while retaining their full speed and all their cannons. More importantly, they could attack with precision that heavy bombers couldn't match. Wing Commander Robert Bateson led the first precision strike against V-weapon sites on February 15, 1944. 12 Mosquitoes from No. 140 Wing attacked a launch facility near Abbeville. They approached at 0 feet altitude, racing across the French countryside at 360 miles per hour. German radar never detected them until they were practically overhead. The Mosquitoes pulled up sharply, released their bombs from 1,800 feet, and dove away. The entire attack took 90 seconds from first sighting to last aircraft departing. The launch site was obliterated. All 12 Mosquitoes returned safely. Flak gunners reported they'd barely seen the attacking aircraft, let alone had time to engage them effectively. This became the pattern. Mosquito squadrons attacked V-weapon sites daily throughout spring 1944. They flew in all weather at all hours, hitting targets with accuracy that seemed impossible for fast-moving aircraft. The trick was the two-man crew. While the pilot focused on flying at insane speeds just meters above the ground, the navigator handled target identification and bomb release. This division of labor allowed precision that single-seat fighter bombers couldn't achieve. The statistics told the story of effectiveness. Between February and June 1944, Mosquito squadrons flew over 2,000 sorties against V-weapon sites. They destroyed or severely damaged more than 300 launch facilities. They did this while suffering a loss rate of less than 1%. Comparable missions by heavy bombers resulted in losses exceeding 5%. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real impact was psychological. German construction crews working on V-weapon sites lived in constant terror. Mosquitoes could appear at any moment without warning. The wooden aircraft flew too low for radar, moved too fast for visual detection, and struck with devastating accuracy. Workers started abandoning sites when they heard the distinctive sound of Merlins approaching at low level. General Major Walter Dornberger, in charge of the V-2 rocket program, wrote in his diary about a Mosquito attack he witnessed in April 1944. I was inspecting a launch facility near Watton when the alarm sounded. Before we could reach the shelters, 4 British aircraft appeared. They were flying so low I could see the pilots' faces. Bombs fell with incredible precision. The entire control bunker collapsed. 6 engineers were killed instantly. The aircraft were gone before our flak could fire a single shot. This happens daily. Our crews are terrified. Construction has slowed to a crawl because workers refuse to stay at the sites. The Mosquito's versatility seemed limitless. Photo reconnaissance variants flew missions over Germany that provided intelligence impossible to obtain any other way. These aircraft, stripped of all guns to save weight, flew at 43,000 feet, where no German fighter could reach them. They photographed entire cities in single passes, providing bomb damage assessment that allowed planners to evaluate raid effectiveness. The bomber variants evolved to carry increasingly heavy loads. The B Mark 16 could carry a 4,000-pound blockbuster bomb, the same bomb load as a Lancaster, but delivered by a two-man crew in an aircraft that flew twice as fast and needed a quarter of the fuel. These heavy Mosquitos attacked precision targets throughout Germany with accuracy that conventional bombers couldn't match. One mission demonstrated the Mosquito's capabilities better than any other. On February 18, 1944, the Gestapo held crucial members of the Danish resistance in Aarhus University, awaiting execution. British intelligence received an urgent request. Could the RAF mount a precision strike to destroy the building holding records of resistance members? The building was in a populated area. Collateral damage had to be minimal, and the mission had to happen immediately. The executions were scheduled for the next day. Number 4 Group Headquarters assigned the mission to Number 633 Squadron. 6 Mosquitos would fly to Denmark, identify a specific building in Aarhus, destroy it with pinpoint bombing, and avoid hitting surrounding structures. The navigator in the lead aircraft would have perhaps 5 seconds to identify the target from high-speed, low-level approach. Failure would mean either missing the target or killing Danish civilians. Squadron leader Ted Sizemore led the formation. They crossed the North Sea at wave-top height to avoid radar. Over Denmark, they climbed to 50 feet and raced toward Aarhus at 350 miles per hour. Sizemore's navigator, Flight Lieutenant Peter Cobley, spotted the university building with 4 seconds to target. Sizemore pulled up sharply, released his bombs at 1,500 feet, and dove away. The other 5 Mosquitos followed in sequence, each placing their bombs precisely on the target building. The structure collapsed. Gestapo records were destroyed. Not a single surrounding building was significantly damaged. All 6 Mosquitos returned safely. The Danish resistance members were rescued from the ruins with only minor injuries. The Germans never learned what information had been lost because the records were now ash. The German response to the Mosquito's dominance was increasingly desperate. They tried everything. New fighters like the Focke-Wulf 190 Dora 9 and Messerschmitt 109 Gustav 10 were optimized for high-speed interception. Neither could catch a Mosquito in level flight. Jet aircraft like the Messerschmitt 262 had the speed, but lacked the range and reliability to be effective. The Luftwaffe even tried using their own Mosquitos. Several had been captured intact or forced down with minimal damage. German test pilots flew them and were universally impressed. Reports praised the aircraft's handling, performance, and construction quality, but attempts to copy the design failed. German furniture manufacturers couldn't reproduce the Aerolite glue formula. Their wooden structures delaminated under stress. Attempts to use captured Mosquitos operationally ended when the aircraft literally fell apart in flight as the original glue aged. By late 1944, the Mosquito was operating in roles that would have seemed impossible when the aircraft was designed. Night fighter variants prowled German skies, hunting Luftwaffe bombers with AI Mark 10 radar that could detect targets at 5 miles. These wooden fighters achieved kill ratios that exceeded any other night fighter type. Squadron leader Brance Burbridge, the RAF's top-scoring night fighter pilot, claimed 21 German aircraft destroyed. All but 1 kill was achieved while flying Mosquitos. The bomber variants began operations with Bomber Command's Pathfinder Force, marking targets for the main bomber stream. Mosquitos would arrive first, drop target indicators with precision, and remain over the target to correct the aim of following heavy bombers. Then they'd return after the raid to photograph results. These aircraft flew longer missions, faced heavier opposition, and operated in worse conditions than any other RAF type. Yet their loss rate remained consistently below 2%. Fighter-bomber variants flew Ranger missions deep into Germany, attacking trains, convoys, and airfields with devastating effectiveness. A single Mosquito equipped with 57mm Molin's anti-tank gun could destroy an entire train with 1 firing pass. These aircraft hunted across occupied Europe every night, creating chaos in German logistics. The versatility came from the basic design's excellence. The airframe could be modified for any role without losing its essential characteristics. Speed, range, and reliability remained consistent across all variants. The wooden construction proved remarkably durable. Mosquito survived combat damage that would have destroyed metal aircraft. The wooden structure absorbed bullets and shell fragments, then was easily repaired by carpenters rather than specialized metal workers. Production numbers reflected the aircraft's success. Between 1940 and 1950, 7,781 Mosquitoes were built. Production spread across Britain, Canada, and Australia. The aircraft served with air forces from 15 nations. After the war, some remained in service until the 1960s. The design that had been rejected as impractical in 1939 proved to be one of the most successful combat aircraft ever created. The human cost of the Mosquito's success was measured in German casualties. Luftwaffe loss records captured after the war show a grim pattern. Night fighter units lost heavily to Mosquito intruders. More than 400 German night fighters were destroyed by Mosquitoes between 1943 and 1945. Hundreds more bombers fell to Mosquito night fighters. The psychological toll was immeasurable. German aircrew who survived the war consistently rated the Mosquito as the most dangerous opponent they'd faced. Oberst Hajo Hermann, who commanded German night fighter operations, wrote in his memoir about the Mosquito's impact. "We called them the Wooden Death. They were everywhere. Over our fields when we tried to land, over targets marking for the heavy bombers, hunting our fighters in the darkness. We had no effective counter. Our fighters couldn't catch them. Our flak couldn't track them. They simply did as they pleased in our airspace. The psychological effect on our crews was devastating. Men who had flown 100 combat missions broke down when they learned Mosquitoes were operating in their sector. The cost to the RAF was remarkably low. Of the 7,781 Mosquitoes built, approximately 1,000 were lost to all causes during the war. This included accidents, mechanical failures, and combat losses. The combat loss rate was consistently the lowest of any RAF aircraft type in operational service. Mosquito squadrons achieved the highest sortie rates, flew the most dangerous missions, and suffered the fewest casualties. The crews who flew Mosquitoes developed an almost mystical faith in their aircraft. Wing Commander John Cunningham, a night fighter ace with 20 kills, said the Mosquito was the finest aircraft he ever flew. It did everything you asked and then some. Fast, maneuverable, reliable, and deadly. The wooden construction was never a weakness. It was a strength. The aircraft felt solid, responsive, and completely trustworthy. You could push it to limits that would destroy other aircraft, and it would bring you home. The Mosquito's success vindicated Jeffrey de Havilland's original vision. An unarmed bomber relying on speed had proven more survivable than heavily defended bombers. A wooden aircraft had outperformed metal contemporaries. A design rejected by the Air Ministry had become indispensable. Every assumption that led to the rejection had been proven wrong. The final humiliation for German pilots who'd mocked the wooden wonder came in March 1945. As Allied forces advanced into Germany, they captured Luftwaffe bases complete with operations rooms and intelligence files. In one such facility at Akmer, RAF intelligence officers found a wall chart titled Identification Guide for Allied Aircraft Threats. The Mosquito was rated Extreme Danger, Avoid Engagement if possible. Below this was a handwritten note in German. This aircraft is the most dangerous opponent we face. It is faster than our fighters, more maneuverable than it should be, and nearly impossible to destroy. Crews must disengage immediately if Mosquitoes are identified. Do not attempt interception. Do not follow into clouds. Do not assume you can escape if spotted. Your only chance is to avoid detection entirely. The note was signed by the base commander and dated January 1945. By this point, German pilots were under orders not to engage Mosquitoes if any alternative existed. The wooden aircraft that had been mocked as British desperation had become so feared that the Luftwaffe officially declared it too dangerous to fight. Klaus Hoffmann, the pilot who'd laughed at the Mosquito prototype at Hatfield in 1941, survived the war. He was repatriated to Germany in 1946 and eventually emigrated to Canada. In 1973, he visited the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum and found himself standing in front of a restored Mosquito. A museum volunteer, noting his age and accent, asked if he'd served in the war. Hoffman admitted he'd been a Luftwaffe pilot. The volunteer asked if he'd ever encountered mosquitoes. Hoffman smiled sadly. "I saw one on the ground once before the war really got going. I thought it looked ridiculous, like something built by children playing at making aircraft. Then I spent 4 years terrified of them. Every night mission, every patrol, you listened for that particular sound, the smooth howl of merlins in a wooden airframe. If you heard it, you ran. You didn't fight. You didn't investigate. You ran and hoped they hadn't seen you." He reached out and touched the wooden fuselage. "We were told wood made weak aircraft. Furniture couldn't fight. We believed our propaganda. Then these wooden wonders killed thousands of us." The British turned shortage into strength, limitation into advantage. They built the perfect aircraft from the wrong materials and proved everything we knew was wrong. I laughed once. Once was enough. The legacy of the Mosquito extends far beyond its combat record. It proved that unconventional solutions could outperform orthodox designs. It demonstrated that operational requirements mattered more than traditional doctrine. It showed that the right aircraft for a mission might violate every established principle and still be exactly right. Modern air forces study the Mosquito as a case study in effective design. The aircraft achieved its mission parameters through speed and efficiency rather than armor and firepower. It succeeded because it optimized for performance rather than survivability. Every modern fast jet, every stealth aircraft, every design that relies on not being hit rather than surviving hits owes a debt to de Havilland's wooden wonder. The crews who flew Mosquitoes never forgot their aircraft. Veterans organizations maintained active memberships into the 21st century. When restored, Mosquitoes flew at air shows. Former crew members would travel from around the world to see and hear their aircraft once more. The sound of merlins in a wooden airframe brought tears to men who hadn't cried in decades. At the de Havilland Aircraft Museum in London Colney, a Mosquito hangs from the ceiling in the main hall. Below it is a quote from Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, commander of RAF Bomber Command. "The Mosquito was the best aircraft of the war. It could do everything and did it better than aircraft designed for specific roles. Give me 200 Mosquitoes and I'd end the war in 6 months." The statistics support this extraordinary claim. Mosquitoes dropped more than 50,000 tons of bombs on precision targets. They destroyed more than 600 Luftwaffe aircraft in combat. They flew nearly 40,000 combat sorties. They photographed every major target in occupied Europe multiple times. They marked for thousands of heavy bomber raids. They hunted V-weapons, trains, ships, and submarines with equal effectiveness. And they did all this while suffering the lowest loss rate of any RAF combat type. The wooden wonder that German pilots had mocked became the standard by which all other aircraft were measured. Fast, versatile, reliable, and deadly. Built from furniture wood and held together with glue. Crewed by 2 men who trusted their wooden aircraft more than pilots and metal fighters trusted theirs. The greatest vindication came from an unexpected source. In 1946, a group of former Luftwaffe pilots was asked by American intelligence officers to rate the aircraft they'd faced. Which did they fear most? Which was most effective? Which would they have chosen if they could fly any Allied aircraft? The answers were unanimous. The Mosquito. Not the Spitfire with its legendary maneuverability. Not the P-51 Mustang with its range and firepower. Not the Lancaster with its massive bomb load. The wooden aircraft built in furniture factories. The bomber without guns. The fighter that shouldn't have worked. That was the aircraft that had defeated them. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, one of Germany's most successful fighter pilots with 176 kills, summed up the Luftwaffe's perspective in a post-war interview. "We respected the Spitfire, we feared the Mustang, but we were helpless against the Mosquito. It represented everything we couldn't match. British ingenuity taking limited resources and creating something that exceeded anything we could build with unlimited resources. Wood and glue defeated steel and aluminum. 2 men in a furniture factory product destroyed formations we sent to stop them. That aircraft humiliated the Luftwaffe more than any other. We started the war believing in German technical superiority. The Mosquito proved we were wrong." The last word belongs to Geoffrey de Havilland himself. In 1953, being interviewed about his aviation career, he was asked about the Mosquito's success. His response captured everything the aircraft represented. "We were told it couldn't be done. Wood wasn't strong enough. No guns meant no survivability. Speed alone wouldn't work. Every expert said we were wrong. So we built it anyway, proved it worked, then watched it exceed every expectation. The Mosquito succeeded because we ignored what couldn't be done and focused on what needed to be done. Sometimes the best solution is the one everyone says won't work. From that cold November morning in 1941, when German prisoners laughed at a wooden aircraft that looked like a garden shed project, to the desperate orders telling Luftwaffe pilots to avoid engagement at all costs, the Mosquito's journey was triumph through audacity. It proved that British engineering could transform limitation into domination, that desperate shortage could spark brilliant innovation, and that the wooden wonder built in furniture factories could bring German crews down in flames and terror. The Mosquito didn't just win battles. It won the argument that unconventional thinking could defeat orthodox doctrine, that speed could replace armor, that 2 men in a wooden aircraft could do what 10 men in a metal bomber couldn't, that sometimes the best weapon was the one nobody thought would work. The Germans learned this lesson aircraft by aircraft, crew by crew, as the wooden wonders they'd mocked hunted them across European skies and brought them down in numbers that German high command could barely comprehend. In the end, the laugh was on them. The wooden wonder had the last word.